What if being overwhelmed by our emotions is not something that we need to accept as an inevitable part of life? What if there's something that can be done about it so that we don't find ourselves in that situation, or we find ourselves less and less being overtaken by our emotions? I'm Anna from Flow and Purpose. Welcome to my channel. Emotional dysregulation very often occurs as a reaction to outside events. And our initial reaction before we bring consciousness to the matter is to blame the outside, to blame the situation or the person or whatever has triggered this reaction in ourselves for what we're experiencing. And once you have enough self-awareness to realize that actually what is happening inside of you, not only does it release you from feeling powerless about it, but it also enables you to take charge, to take control of your emotions and to investigate them. So it may not be possible in the heat of the moment, but it certainly is possible afterwards. And if you find yourself triggered in ways that seem in disproportion to the situation arising, you may find yourself wondering what it is that it triggers me in this way. And you may notice patterns. You may notice that it's time and again the same sort of things that get triggered, whether it's a feeling of worthlessness, whether it's a feeling of feeling not good enough, or other recurring patterns. And in your case, it may be anger, or it may be anxiety, or it may be any variation on these themes. But the fact that you notice that, the fact that you notice this underlying pattern, is something that feels freeing, feels that you get to understand a lot better where it's coming from. And you may reflect on where it is that you have first experienced that, where the origin of these feelings is. It could be that certain experiences or memories of childhood events surface, where you can find where the fundamental trigger for these emotions is. Very often though, and in my case this has also happened, is that we get stuck there. We get really into the analysis. We get into, you can develop in a way a secondary modality of poor old me, this is because this happened, this is not something in my control. But it's important not to stay there. So if you notice yourself addicted to YouTube films about the origin of these emotional patterns, childhood trauma, complex trauma, and maybe attachment, childhood attachment strategies, and you find yourself hanging on in there, realize that that's another pattern, that's another maybe blind alley that you end up going to. It's important to have enough of an understanding, so if it feels aligned to be exploring that, do so, but don't keep on hanging there, because it can evolve into its own story, into its own, in a way, little prison. Once we have understanding that these patterns have an origin, we also can soften. We don't feel ourselves inadequate for having these patterns. And at the same time, we don't feel shame to allow them to arise. So by allowing them to arise, there's a point where there's a certain amount of disidentification with the pattern. So you are able to observe the emotional reactivity and the pattern as it arises in real time. And you discover that you are not that. So whereas before your heightened emotional experiences have a way of dragging you behind them, as it were, now you're able to observe them arising, maybe reaching a high point, and then completely by themselves dissipating. So by having observed that a few times, there develops a trust that these emotions are not ruling your life, and that we have a choice whether to identify with them, whereby where it appears as if we're being ruled by them, or whether we can just allow them to be present, and in their own way they dissipate. And in my experience, the more we're able to do that, the more free we feel and the less these emotions arise. So please experiment with this. Please experiment with just being aware as something challenging is arising, and aware of possibly mind commentary that is being triggered at the same time. But in the act of being aware, there's a disconnection. We're no longer fueling the emotion, fueling it by resisting it or fueling it by wanting it to change. By purely observing it as it unfolds, in a way, the fire is not being fueled by our investment in it, and the emotion dissolves by itself. Let me know how you go, and let me know if this has been helpful. Thank you for watching.